people are more comfortable in person again. And so, we're pretty much back to where we were.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go through, let's kind of do this list, because I think one of the bigger things, or one of the biggest things, is knowing what you actually have in your insurance policy. So let's go through this list of endorsements, kind of like whatever you think, or these are the most, like when you read through all of the fine writing in your policy, what are kind of the most important ones that people maybe typically miss, or just ones that are just important that they have?
Sure, yeah. The big one, obviously, we're talking about homeowners, is the amount you have for your house. I mean, that's when we talked about that already. So there's a couple other things that are kind of throw-in coverages. Typically, they're just percentages of whatever the dwelling amount is. So those I think we're probably okay with. Liability is one thing I'd probably look at. Again, we're in a very litigious society. I will say that on a homeowner policy especially, liability limits are very inexpensive. So if you have $100,000 now, you could go to $300,000 for like $6.
Yeah, wow.
And so kicking that up is not going to cost you much, and you're going to, 3 or 5-fold increase your liability limit. So that's one area good. I'd say to look at. The other ones, I would say the one big one that we see a lot, especially here in Illinois, is water backup coverage. It's probably, again, I can't say that it's the most common claim we see, but it's one of the most common claims we see. And so it's not automatically included. Actually, I guess years ago, some companies did do that. They automatically included it. It didn't go great, so now they took it away. And if you want it, you have to buy it back.
Yeah.
And so basically, what that coverage is. You have a huge rain and your sump pump dies, or it can't keep up with the amount of water, or you have a bathroom in your basement and it shoots up through the drain and causes damage in your basement. And so that's a water backup claim, very common. And the minimum coverage you can get for that is $5,000. And a lot of times companies will only be able to offer that. What I've seen in my experience is that $5,000 will probably get you to pay the remediation company to dry everything out and kind of make a mess of your basement and rip everything up. But that's about where it ends. And so if you have anything in your basement aside from your Christmas decorations, I think, any carpet or any drywall or anything like that, I think you want to go higher than that. And first of all, make sure you have it. That's the most important thing. And then probably increase it. I will say because it's a common claim, it's not terribly inexpensive. But that being said, there's a decent chance if you're going to have a claim, it's going to be that one. And so you want to make sure that you have coverage for that. So that's one of them. The other one that's relatively new these last few years is called service line coverage. And companies weren't offering it up until... certainly within, I think, like the last 5 to 7 years is when I feel like I've started seeing it, and it just sort of popped up. And basically what service line coverage is for is when you have like a pipe or something that goes out to the street that, like your water or sewer goes out to that, and like it gets old and it collapses, or like a tree root grows in and kind of blocks it up, and then, you have stuff come up through your basement. There's the cost for the basement to repair that and all that we just talked about, but there's also the very expensive cost of having someone come out and digging up your yard and taking that and replacing it. Service line now covers that. Generally, the limit is $10,000 or $20,000, but the cost of it is pretty inexpensive. And so I had an experience with my neighbor who had that exact thing happen to him, and he called me and he just said, "Hey, I had this happen. I'm sure it's not covered, but I want to let you know." And I said, "No, I think you have service line." We pretty much put service line on almost every policy at this point, just again because of how common it's becoming. But I said, "I think you do have it." And so for him, it was $15,000 to rip up his yard and get that replaced, and he had $10,000 of coverage. And so he got a check from the company within a day or two for $10,000, and he was ecstatic. He was very happy. So that's another one. The third one I would say is, and this is a little more of a standard endorsement to have, is extended replacement cost or guaranteed replacement cost. And what that basically is that you have a number for your house that we already talked about. That coverage, that endorsement would give you an extra 25 or 50%. Guaranteed replacement cost basically just says whatever it is, we're going to do it. But at the very least, it'd be 25 or 50% on top of what you have. So for easy math, let's say your house is worth $1 million. You could have up to another 250,000 or another 500,000 of coverage, just to give you kind of that wiggle room. And again, with inflation and how much things are costing, you want to make sure you have it. Again, it's pretty standard. It's super cheap. Just make sure you have that. And if you have the 25%, maybe you kick that to 50%, something like that. But those are probably the top ones.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. I think what's interesting is like, as we start talking about all these details, yes, it can be, like you said, like it can be boring, but at the same time, I think everybody cares. Everybody who owns a home, has a car, like any of these things, you care because if something happens, you want to make sure that you're covered.
Right.
So that's where I feel like all of the little endorsements underneath your overall policy are actually equally as important as the coverage that you have yourself.
People really start looking at their policy in depth once they have a claim, right? That's when they were like,